Yep, it's just about to start now, John.
Okay, and for those of the members of the public who are joining the meeting, you can look back on this, and there's a link. If you go onto the local authority website, you'll be able to trace it from there. So can I formally welcome everyone and thank you for making the time to be with us in this regular IJB meeting this morning. And also, excuse me, I was sort of ambushed with Anne and Lisa in the special meeting because we didn't expect, and there was no reason why they shouldn't be in the special meeting because their name was added to the list, and of course out went the invitation, and of course they very dutifully, to their credit, joined the meeting. But I can say formally to Lisa Cameron, who comes as a staff representative from social work, and I embarrassed Lisa by saying say something so that you appear on my television screen, and she duly did that, but I won't ask her to do that this morning. I see Anne Cameron Burns fully on my screen, and Anne is the NHS GGC non-executive representative, and I welcome both of them again, even though I welcomed them in the special meeting. Also, Annie, who has been quite spicy this morning in our general conversation before the meeting, which is always the best part of the IJB, is the warm up. But Annie comes to us as the NHS trade union representative. So welcome, Annie. Apologies, Elaine, is that you, or is it that's Kenneth? Is it Ken?
Yes, Jed, we've got received no apologies this morning.
Okay, that's great. Declaration of interests. As you know, each IJB members are invited to declare any interests in relation to items of business that are due to be considered on the agenda. Is there any declaration of interests? There being none, I move on to the minute. I'll do it page by page. I've got it here. And this is the minute of the Friday, the 19th of November, 2021. For accuracy or content, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7. It's actually 11 on my sheet here, but I think that's all the minutes of that meeting. And then there's the meeting, the special meeting of Friday the 14th. And I take page 1 for content and accuracy, and page 2, and there's just one paragraph on page 3. Okay, I take it that those two meetings and the minutes have been ratified. Thank you. Ken, you're going to take the next item on the agenda. In fact, the next two, and if you tell us what they're about, it'll save me reading off this script.
That's correct, yeah, yes, I'm happy take you through those. The first report concerns the continuation of the appointment of Christine as Interim Chief Officer. The previous approval for this really only took us up to the end of December, so we needed to formally recognise the fact that it was agreed between the two Chief Executives, the Council Chief Executive and the Health Board Chief Executive, that the interim appointment continue for a further period of time. So this is just seeking the confirmation of that appointment up until the end of March. There will, of course, be a further report on the position related to the Chief Officer of the IJB at the next meeting, which is on the 25th of March. So we're just asking for approval for that, Chair.
And I take it as a courtesy, Christine, you're willing to accept this extension?
I am, John, yes.
I take it by your silence that that is approved. Thank you. Ken, you want to carry on?
Chair. Yeah, the next report is just to confirm membership. You've already welcomed Anne to the IJB, and this is just to confirm her appointment for 3 years beginning on the 1st of January, which we're already aware of, and also the official appointment of Anne to the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee, which the IJB needs to make that formal appointment. So that is the other recommendation. It's also to note that Dr. Shivaprasad's membership ends in February, so there'll need to be an update provided to the board whether she's going to continue with a membership or a replacement is appointed. That again will come to the meeting in March.
Okay, and we're formally noting that, Ken.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, we formally note that. Thanks, Ken, for that.
Sorry, Chair, we need to. There needs to be the formal appointment of Anne to the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee.
Okay, okay. Can we agree that as an IJB?
Agreed.
Okay, it's agreed. Thumbs up. Okay, is that membership update complete, Ken?
It is, Chair. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We come to, there was a paper sent out, Christine, a few days ago, and it's probably on another page of your laptop, because it was to be confirmed and it has been. And so if you need to come out and come back in again to another page, then do that. Christine, you're going to take us through this, are you?
Ken's going to take us through it, John, and we are here for any questions.
Okay.
Thank you again, Chair. Members of the board will remember the decision taken at the special meeting a couple of weeks ago. At that special meeting, it was agreed to give the Interim Chief Officer, in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair, various powers to deal with urgent situations as they arose as a result of the situation with the rapid spread of the virus and the need to make urgent decisions that couldn't fit neatly into the timetable for the meetings of the IJB. So the proposal in the paper is to seek a continuation of those emergency powers for a further period up until the next scheduled meeting of the IJB. The background to that, Chair, is set out in the paper, and as Christine's indicated, both herself and Francis are happy to provide any more information in relation to the background for that. So, as I said, the proposal is to seek the IJB's approval to these emergency powers be continued for another period of time up until the next meeting of the Integration Joint Board. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Oh, Lisa Marie?
Thanks, Chair. No, just to say that I am happy to agree with the recommendations. I think it's worked in the past. We've had really significant issues ongoing and things are still changing day to day. So I think it's really important that we have measures in place that ensure service continuity. And the thing that gives me comfort in this and always has is that I know both yourself and Jacqueline would be quite firm interrogators of any considerations. So I feel like it's getting that IJB check before we make decisions we maybe wouldn't always make. So I'm comfortable with it. And I think the report back in March is an important thing as well.
Okay, thank you, Lisa Marie, for that vote of confidence in our capability as chair and vice chair. I see Annie, your hand's up.
Yeah, again, I agree in the principle. I suppose my concern is when it has an impact on direct staff and our members, and I suppose the slight confusion with the changing in the rules as of next week and where that would impact. I mean, we're not going to see massive changes and improvements in our situations within NHS and social services immediately because people can do more things on Monday. But I just wanted to sort of take cognizance of the potential impact or confusion in the messaging to people.
Ken or Christine, anything to say?
Confusion in messaging people in what way, Annie?
I suppose national government are really taking the brakes off everything. Scottish government are reducing the controls in place and social distancing and various measures as of Monday and back to the workplace, etc., hybrid officing. And it's obviously in the background to that, you're suddenly not going to recruit. If you had a crisis in home care or delayed discharge, you're not suddenly going to have all the new staff in place immediately. So I suppose I'm conflated insofar as I agree with the principle of extending it completely, but I am anticipating that if you made a decision that had an impact on our staff, they would put their hands up and say, but why? How? Because the government is telling us this.
Okay, Anne Cameron Burns, you want to speak?
Yes, John. Thank you for letting me in there. I think it's just to reassure that I am in support of this. I think I got the reassurance at the last meeting on the 14th, if anything that affected the staff on the NHS side or council side, that they would go through the due process and the same process that we've agreed. So we got that recognition, and I again reiterate, I would hope this would be the same this time. So I'm happy to support it until the next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Christine, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm just going to say exactly what Anne has said. So we discussed this at the last meeting, Annie, and I did give reassurance that we would still be working within policy that's in place for NHS and council staff. So actually we didn't have to use any of these emergency governance arrangements since the last time, and we're really hoping and touching wood that we don't need to use them again. But it's just a bit of a belt and braces approach that, depending on the demand in acute hospitals, if there is a surge, that will have an impact on our services, and we may have to make some decisions to ensure that our critical services can continue to operate at safe staffing levels. So we haven't used any of that since the last time, and we're hoping not to, but we just need it. And as I think we've already said in the paper says, any decision I was looking to take, I would be having a full discussion with John and Jacqueline as chair and vice chair before making that move.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for that assurance. And in fact, to be honest, I think at this point it would be acute staff may need to be displaced to help community because of the huge numbers of delayed discharges. So I appreciate that and thank you. I just think people are getting a bit confused out there with the national messaging, not the council messaging. So I think a briefing to staff would be helpful.
I can just come back in there on that one. So we have stood up our leadership network, and it's now meeting online fortnightly. And we've already had that this week, and we did explain that although the general message is restrictions are being lifted and things are getting back to more of the kind of, for want of a better word, normal, actually we still are not out of the woods yet, and we are still anticipating pressure in our acute hospitals, and that may require us to do something a bit different to support that, and as you say, to make sure that we are reducing delays in discharges when people are fit for discharge where possible. So we have explained that to we've got 150 kind of frontline managers across the HSCP, both NHS and the council. So we have had quite a detailed discussion on that this week. And we also put that, I do updates in a chief officer briefing that goes out to every member of staff within the HSCP. And I think that's actually, we agreed at the staff partnership that would be shared with trade union members as well. So you will see the communication. So hopefully, I do appreciate that what's coming out, what we are telling our staff is a little bit different than what's coming out to the general public.
Thank you, and I think that's really answered my point, and you've acknowledged what I'm saying, because I just think people, the general public, think it's over. Okay,
thank you. With that assurance and discussion and being recorded, Ken, I take it that's as we've done due diligence there?
Yes, we just need to formally agree the recommendations in the report, Chair.
Okay, can we do that? Formally agree?
Agreed.
The paper that's there. Thank you. Okay. We move on to item 5, which is the rolling action log. Christine, is there anything that we should be noting here? I mean, they're both medium, longer term things. That one, in the case of the development, the workforce plan, the Scottish Government have pushed it further out, and in the case of the other one, it has also, on unscheduled care, it has also got a backstop date in the future.
Absolutely, John. So Scottish Government, in recognition of the pressure that is sitting within health and social care at the moment, have moved the deadline for the workforce plan to July 2022. So we will work to that. Unscheduled care, as you know, is coordinated by Glasgow City HSCP as a whole system, and we will be aiming to bring back a full suite of papers on unscheduled care to our next IJB.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on this rolling action log? Okay. Thank you. In the absence of anything, we move on to the first of your reports, Christine, updating us.
Thank you, John. Yes, so the first report, I won't go through the whole paper because you have the detail there, but I do want to just highlight some key areas. Now, the first one is what we've just touched on briefly there around our kind of refreshed pandemic responses and our planning. So Scottish Government and COSLA a few weeks ago declared that social care was a national priority, and did write to local resilience partnerships just before Christmas to say that, to look at how they could assist health and social care in dealing with some of that pressure. So we've been doing quite a significant amount of work. All of the HSCPs across Greater Glasgow and Clyde have been working together on this. We've met Scottish Government, and particularly the Cabinet Secretary, on a couple of occasions over the last week to 10 days, just about what we can do collectively. We have been asked quite a lot of data and assurance have been asked from the Scottish Government. We are submitting that this afternoon, and that really just explains a bit more about our resilience planning. So what we, as we just discussed with Annie there, that we are, although all of these restrictions are lifting, and certainly the kind of view is much more optimistic, we are not out of the woods yet, and we are anticipating a surge in demand on acute hospitals, probably from this coming week. So Scottish Government had asked chief execs from councils and NHS and chief officers to increase capacity in some of the critical services. In the main, our care at home services and our care homes. So we have got a plan in Renfrewshire. We will submit that today. That has been based on looking at where we can redeploy or deploy some of our staff from wider HSCP services into critical services on a voluntary basis, and also working with partners in the council around what they can provide for us in terms of increased capacity. We have went down the road of the asking partners if they can provide some of the wraparound type of support that would free up and build some capacity in our service, so that our very experienced social care workforce can continue to deliver the direct care aspect of the job, but other parts of that can potentially other people can assist. So the focus has been on getting some more support around support type roles. That's we have some care at home staff who are non-drivers, so we're looking at pairing them up with a driver, which will increase capacity. Support type staff within our 3 internal care homes, and that's around a kind of buddying up and befriending role for the older people who are residents, assisting with meals and snacks, assisting with visits, and generally just freeing the staff up to be able to focus on direct care. We also have been working with Engage Renfrewshire to look at how we can potentially employ sessional workers to do some of these support roles, and that would be for now, but also would potentially provide some further resilience in a longer term basis, because we always have a bit, as you know, what we refer to as winter pressures. So there's been a whole host of activity, and we are in very close discussion with the neighbouring HSCPs, but also Scottish Government on what we're doing. So we did meet with Jane Grant, the Chief Exec of Greater Glasgow and Clyde on Wednesday, and went through our plan. She was happy with what we have in place, and we've also shared that and met with our Chief Exec of the Council. So a lot of work happening, and we are hoping, and touching wood, that the surge won't be as great as we think, but we do have plans in place to be able to increase capacity in those critical areas that I've talked about. Because of that, we've increased, and you'll see at 4.5 that we have enhanced our governance arrangements. So there's a whole range of meetings that we have stepped up, and we've introduced some huddles and different things just to make sure that we are really on it in terms of safe service delivery, and that we have an overview of any areas that we have particularly difficulty with, whether that's resident service users or indeed staffing issues. So you can see the detail in that at 4.5. And you'll see in the in 5, we've given you some more detail around staff testing and the self-isolation exemptions. And we've got a bit of detail about our vaccination programme in there. Care homes, as you know, we have 23 older people care homes within Renfrewshire. 3 of those are our own HSCP operated care homes. And at the time of writing at the moment, the majority of the care homes all have at least one staff member or resident who are positive to COVID in the previous 14 days. However, positive cases that are being identified are being managed within the care homes, and symptoms are predominantly mild. So that's a wee bit different than our previous experience of COVID. So we are very optimistic about that. Item 10, a little bit of detail about our day support and respite. So we have been working really hard for our day services to continue to remain open, which was is a bit different than the time previously, and that's what we're doing. So even although potentially we're redeploying staff into care homes or care at home, this is also to ensure that our day services can remain operating, because we know they're absolutely a lifeline for many people within Renfrewshire. And just lastly, a little bit, you'll see at item 11 about our mental health inpatients. Significant pressure across mental health services right across Greater Glasgow and Clyde and across Scotland. We've been working again as a whole system across GG&C to make sure that we've got a contingency plan in place, particularly dealing with an increased demand for inpatient beds, but potentially if we have a drop in our staffing. So that's all in place as well. We've been doing that as a whole system, and the chief execs are satisfied with what we've got in place at the moment. But that's not to say that the services are under pressure, and staff are absolutely going above and beyond at the moment. So that's all I wanted to highlight for that paper. And I see there was a couple of hands up before I go on to the next.
Okay, and I'll take Anne at the top of the picture, and then I'll take Lisa, and then I will take Jacqueline.
Thank you. That's great, and thanks for that information. Can I just start the care homes? So we have 3 that it's part of the HSCP and 20 that's private. Can I ask? He says there were some clients or patients in the care homes that have tested positive, some staff members as well. I get figures, every other day about do we have any closures within that? Christine, is there anywhere it's closed, or are they closed with restrictions, and what are we trying to do to support that?
I'll pass you over to Karen, who's on, who will be able to update you on the position of our care homes, because you're absolutely right, Anne. We've had some, and it's been a bit of a fluid situation, that some have been closed completely to admissions, some have been closed or open with control measures, but I'll pass to Karen for the very most up-to-date info for you.
Morning, Anne. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And as Christine pointed out, it is exceptionally fluid. So as of Thursday, we had 9 care homes who were either closed completely or closed with restrictions in place. And sometimes those restrictions are, if there's an outbreak in one unit within a care home, then that unit becomes closed to admissions, but the other units are open for admissions. That's not to say it's closed to visiting. It's really just they're closed for new admissions within the care home itself. And as Christine says, as we're starting to see a real drop in the number of residents within our care homes who are now positive for COVID. In fact, there was a drop of 40 residents. So that's people who have come out of the isolation period. So within a week, we saw 40 residents come out of that isolation period. And at the moment, we have between, I think it's 17 or 18 positive residents throughout all of those 23 care homes that Christine just described. So that's a really positive position. And of those residents, the vast majority of them are either have no symptoms or have got very mild flu cold-like symptoms. So we're certainly not seeing the impact that we were seeing in the first or the second wave. And also all of our residents who can have all of their immunisation, including their boosters, have received that. And we know that has made such a significant difference for how well our residents have managed and coped with the kind of onslaught of the Omicron variant.
Lisa Marie.
Thanks, John. Christine, I'm about to ask a bit of a how long is a piece of string question, so sorry in advance. Looking at the section on enhanced governance at 4.5, and I would note that I think we need to be cautious in downscaling any governance measures because the situation is so changing. But I wondered if there's a rough sort of closer to normal point we're looking at, or even a review point, so that we have an understanding of how frequently this has been looked at. I appreciate it'll change across the pieces, but when I look at the list, it looks like a list of meetings, but actually I can see that it's quite a small amount of people undertaking a lot of that work necessarily. So it's just so we're making sure that we're not putting in increased pressure on you if it's not needed.
Christine, are you going to respond to that, please?
Yeah. So for a very brief period of time, we had stepped down some of this because things were pretty stable. I think for about a fortnight, we had managed to step down the care, particularly the care home governance, because things were very stable, and we stood back some of the daily huddles as well. That's only been stepped back up again since about Christmas. And we think that the biggest pressure will be the next 3 to 4 weeks. So we're hoping and we are reviewing this every week. We won't be meeting unless it's required, because I do really appreciate people's diaries and times, and also just a lot of our staff are very tired at the moment. So we are stepping that down. We're reviewing it as and when. So we hope that the end of February will begin to be a bit much more optimistic period for us, and we can begin to get back to a bit more of business as usual and take some of these extra meetings out.
Thanks, Christine, that's helpful.
Jacqueline.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the pressures that we're under as an IJB in social care. Indeed, every IJB in the country and UK-wide is facing the same pressures. And just to thank Christine and the team for the measures that they're taking to address this pressure. I read the Audit Scotland report yesterday, which made for pretty grim reading, and as they were saying, urgent action is needed. We can't wait for the National Care Service. That's 5 years away, so urgent action is needed nationally now, and we're no different from any other IJB, as I said. Also to thank Engage Renfrewshire. I think a lot of the IJBs are now relying on the third sector, voluntary sector, for support. And again, as you said, Christine, we need to look at that resilience for the future, because all these things are kind of like all hands on deck for the time being, but in the long term we need to look at this overall. And as I say, this is a national issue, it's not just for our IJB, but as you said, there's lots of national meetings where people are putting their heads together to try and fix it before, well, it is a crisis at the moment, but anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank the team for that. I've got a very specific question that I keep asking and nobody seems to be able to answer it. It's an NHS question, and it was an inquiry I got as a ward councillor around people who are in hospital who require a booster COVID vaccination. I managed to arrange this for the resident who contacted me, but it seems to be, and I'm not sure if it is, a policy that people are not being vaccinated on wards. And I wondered if any of our NHS colleagues could enlighten me on that one.
Thank you for these kind comments, Jacqueline. I'm sure they'll be appreciated by Christine and her team. Thank you. Annie, I see your hand up.
Hi, thank you. I can answer Jacqueline's question right away because I sit on the vaccination implementation planning board with Anne Harkness and NHS GGC chairs, and there is it's happening at the moment that they're looking at clients that are in longer stay wards. Obviously, you would appreciate if people are in a very short period of time, it's challenging to get your vaccination, but those that are in longer stay in mental health and longer stay wards, there is a vaccination programme, and in fact it's taking place now to ensure that they are updated and boosted. There are complexities, as you appreciate, in the vaccination, in the storage and implementation once you open a vial, but yes, that's undertaken and it was discussed at this week's meeting and assurance was given. So your member should be able to get their vaccination. I was just going to sort of raise, and thank you for that governance, because sitting within the NHS and on the NHS Area Partnership Forum, and Anne will probably agree with this, is there is a huge discussion about acute, and in the media and news there is always discussion about acute and hospitals under pressure. And I, as one of the APF members, very much always shout about the issues happening within HSPCs and the social care sector and the huge demands and needs. And the best place for older people and patients is at home and in home care. And we really raise that bar all the time. The crisis in acute beds is actually very much dependent on that people can be discharged home and safely into the care of their families and carers and social carers. and the third sector. So really appreciate everything you've said, Christine, in your governance paper there, and really fly that flag on behalf of Renfrewshire that you are doing everything in your power. The media today has also reported on the importance of visiting and social contact for older and frail people. And I think we really need to up that game, because most people will report that their frailer elderly people have become more frail during the pandemic because they haven't had the social interactions that they previously had. So just a big thank you to all the staff that are working so hard.
Okay, thank you, Annie. And I now see that Diane.
Hi, yeah, it was just really to come back to the vaccinations for the patients within mental health inpatients, just to see just to reassure people, as Annie has said, we have this on our rolling programme. It's quite robust within patients within Renfrewshire with regard to the longer stay and older adults, and also the adult patients coming in with regard to their people who haven't had, some may have not had their first injection or their second, and also the booster. And weekly updates we are recording this and ensuring these are done as well. So there's an ongoing thing with the nursing staff, but we also have separate, we have a testing clinic as well for our staff, but it's also linked in with that is the vaccination clinic. So it's just that it's ongoing and there's a record of it, and it's very much so maintained in Renfrewshire, just to reassure everybody in the mental health inpatient side.
Thank you, Diane. Christine, do you want to say anything? You don't need to say anything, but just at the end of this interesting and helpful discussion.
No, I think what has been reflected is that there is a lot of emphasis on the pressure that's in acute hospitals, but what also that means is the pressure for demand on our care at home and our care homes. And it's a very complex area, delayed discharges. As I'm sure many people will know, there's so many factors. If someone is in hospital and then it's deemed that they're assessed as not able to go home without a care at home package, or indeed they need a residential placement, there is a bit of time involved in the family and that person making that decision. It's such a big decision. So we are working really closely with families around potentially offering interim placements as well. So a lot of work. We meet we have 2 meetings per day in Renfrewshire around delayed discharges. One of those is a board-wide meeting that we discuss everything and identify any barriers, because we do know that hospital is not an option for people when they are fit for discharge, and it's not a good option either in terms of older people around losing some of their independence. So we do work very closely across the board area on that, and we've got a bit of a plan in place about increasing our capacity to try and move people out even quicker. And we've also been working with some of our external providers for care at home, who have been one provider's been out to Zimbabwe doing some overseas recruitment, and we've managed to block book some of that. So we are absolutely looking at every way that we can increase capacity within Renfrewshire to make sure that when people are fit for discharge in Renfrewshire, they get out into the package that they need and get to the place that they need to be, and that's home.
Thank you, Christine. Christine, it's easy for the chair to say, would you pass on the thanks of the IJB and its members to those who are working so hard over such a long period? But I think the compliment in this discussion has been that the members have been asking pertinent questions and you've been answering them, and your report has given assurance that the tone of this discussion is that we're very supportive of what you're doing and would cheer you on from the sidelines, as it were, to do more and to continue to use your initiatives and the skills of your corporate management team and those who work for them to continue to do that. This has been a long business, and we long to get together again. And I want to realise these huddles. I want to cuddle some of you when I see you at the tea urn eventually, because it's been such a long time that we've not been able to see each other, and and to be with each other in the way that we normally would. So convey our genuine thanks to your team. Now I ask you to, are you going to take the next item?
I am, John, and that's appreciated. Yes, so the next item is another Chief Officer update, and it's mostly focusing on operational activity and any policy developments that we've had to look at. So again, I won't go through every part of this paper, but focus on a couple of key areas. The first one, which is a really important development for us in Renfrewshire, and particularly residents of Bishopton, is item 5, and that's just really an update on Bishopton. I know that we have had many discussions highlighting the capacity challenges around the increased population over the last couple of years within Bishopton, and I'm pleased to advise that in December, both the HSCP and NHS GG&C did present a business case to the Finance, Planning and Performance Committee with some options and potential solutions to the challenges that we face, and that this was agreed. And so the proposal was to develop do some refurbishment work to the existing Bishopton Health Centre, and also build a new build satellite service in the Gartnavel village as well. So it was a kind of two-prong approach, and we got agreement for both. So the proposal will see, and I'm just checking my notes here, that so there was a Section 75 developers contribution of £1 million. And also we had another £1 million match funding from the Scottish Government, so that those will both be used for building the new build facility. And we think that this is a very positive message and positive solution for Renfrewshire, particularly as we know, as in lots of areas, we're not alone around the UK, as new builds get built in areas that can put pressure on the existing health services and other services. So we're really delighted that this has been agreed, and we'll be progressing this with our colleagues in NHS GG&C, anticipating that completion summer 2024. So happy to take any questions on that at the end of this. The workforce plan we've already discussed about, the Scottish Government have given us a little bit more time. There's also a bit of an update on the strategic plan in there at point 7, and we've extended our consultation into February. Again, we've had pretty positive feedback so far on our strategic plan. I think the strategic plan really was a reflection of the partnership working that we do within Renfrewshire, and we have worked really closely right through the pandemic with our strategic planning group, which has meant that we have got quite wide consultation even in the draft plan. So that's a positive. And the last thing that I have on this paper, but I'm actually going to pass to my colleague Stuart Sutton, Clinical Director, and that's the update that's at item 10 on St James Medical Centre. So if we can just take that and bring Stuart in, and then I see Annie's got her hand up, and we can come back to questions on the paper, if you're okay with that, John.
Yes, Stuart, are you in the room?
Yes, I'm here, Chair. I'll take over. Thanks very much, Christine. So this is an update on St James Medical Centre. I won't go through the whole kind of item on the paper in detail, but just to give you some headlines, this is a small practice in Paisley. It's had some fairly significant workforce challenges since, certainly at least for the last 5 years since I've been in post. It's been run by a single-handed GP contractor with a partnership vacancy. Since the other partner had resigned some years ago. Effectively, things came to a head in September when the current contractor handed in their notice, and that left us with a vacancy effectively, and nobody running the practice when that notice period expired. We agreed short term that it would be appropriate to transfer to a board managed practice, and that involved the staff moving over to short term employment, working for the health board. And that would allow us time to kind of undertake a more complex consultation and decision-making process around the long-term plan for the practice. So you can see the outline of the different options that were considered there in terms of where we can go with any practice, and these are standard options with any GP contract that becomes vacant. Ultimately, we liaised with local GP practices and sought, wherever possible, an agreement for another practice to take over the entire list, or to run the entire practice, or to move those patients within their practice. But I think, as you will appreciate, currently it's an incredibly difficult time in every part of health and social care, and certainly none of the GP practices within the Paisley area were able to take on the entire practice. For a combination of reasons, including the fact that the current premises are not our own. It isn't a health centre premises. The premises aren't suitable for a new contract because they aren't compliant with disability discrimination regulation in terms of accessibility. And due to the likelihood of success, this was decided that the only option would be to close the practice and allocate the patients to the neighbouring practices. That on your options list is option 3 in 10.6. There are obviously, we're really mindful that whenever a practice closes, this is, very, very concerning for patients and who are registered with that GP surgery. We viewed this as the safest way to manage the process by allocating patients to other GP practices in the area. So that will be done in a really organised, standardised fashion. So people will get a new GP that they will be registered with automatically. They won't have to do anything. That will all happen exactly as this practice closes on the 31st of March, as the new practice opens as they move to their new practice on the 1st of April. They will automatically be registered, and so that's all being managed by primary care support in conjunction with eHealth. We've sent letters to all of the patients. We wanted to make sure that, as well as keeping the IJB updated, it was really important that the staff and patients who were directly affected were made aware of this as soon as possible, and certainly in advance of hearing it from other places. So that has happened. So all the patients have been written to with details of the next steps going forward. We've also arranged 3 consultation afternoons, 1 in person, 2 remotely, so that people who've got specific issues or concerns can come to a meeting with myself and colleagues from primary care support. Staff, we've had regular meetings with staff. All the staff were TUPE'd across, so they were transferred to health board employment, and they will remain health board employees even when the practice closes, and they will enter a period of redeployment. So those staff will not be lost. They'll be supported into finding appropriate other roles within the health board and the HSCP, which again is positive. Additionally, we've been working with neighbouring practices because obviously this is a significant change for them, and they will be having patients registered with them by the health board. Fortunately, we've had a positive engagement with 2 or 3 practices that have said they can take on a reasonably large number of patients. So once we've managed that transfer process of the patients to the practices that will be able to take a larger number of patients, the impact on the neighbouring practices in terms of numbers of patients they individually will take will not be sort of quite so significant. So kind of all the way through, we've tried to make sure that all of the kind of key stakeholders, particularly the patients, the staff, and the neighbouring practices, have been involved at the earliest possible opportunity and supported through the process. But obviously happy to take questions at the end, as Christina said.
Thanks, Stuart, for that very helpful and lengthy assurance, because this is a complex matter, and patients are rightly concerned about where they'll go. It seems to me, in both reading the paper, listening to Christine and yourself, that we have looked at this in every which way, and that people are not having to go and find, as they might have thought, oh, I'll need to go and find a GP. That's being handled for them. If they're not satisfied, there's an escape hatch there where they can vote with their feet and go elsewhere. It's not been easy, I've no doubt, for the sole partner there, struggling on. There'll be a lot of guilt in terms of the decision they come to and the consequences of it. And so we appreciate all of that, and we appreciate too that you have set yourself up as the kind of collator of all of this for all the GPs in our area, as the director of these matters. And sometimes I'm sure you go home at night and wish you hadn't volunteered and put your hand up. But we thank you too for doing that. And I have to say too that you seem a very nice fellow, and I've never met you in my life, but I look forward to meeting you soon. Okay, are there any questions exactly on that, not on the other parts of the report, or any hands that have already been up? Is there any questions to Stuart for that? Now, Anne Cameron Burns, is your question to on this, or is it on the wider report?
No, it's on this.
Right, okay.
I think Annie was before me, but I'm happy to jump the queue.
Annie had her hand up about something else.
I've got both, but I'll let Anne jump the queue. It's all right.
Well,
She might ask my second question.
Annie, I would be surprised if you didn't have something on both. Margaret, and after Anne.
Right, Stuart, thank you very much. Really, actually, as you were going along, I was ticking off the questions that you were answering for me and things like that. I just don't see one of the things, because I'm just old school, that you go to your GP, you ask to go onto their list and they say yes or no. And I don't think there's been ever a time where you went to a GP and they says, no, we're not taking you. But there might be, I don't know. I can't see the numbers of patients that we're talking about here, Stuart, in the report. Have I just missed it? What numbers are we talking about this GP practice? Do we know?
Yep, apologies. So that is, I think it's because we put it right at the start, so it kind of gets a bit lost further down. But yes, so it's got a list size of 2,971. As of October 2021, and it's the second smallest in Renfrewshire. So our average list size is about 6,400. So, and I think, as we've said, that the long term, the sustainability of smaller organisations is always going to be much more difficult, because there's just no slack in the system. And as you know, unlike kind of directly managed services, if you're off sick or you can't get a locum or you can't get cover, you're responsible for delivering that contract. So that's a huge responsibility for a GP contract holder as an individual.
Okay, so just one more question around that. Sure, I'm lucky enough to live in Millport. So our GP practice is, we have one, when the GP went to sell it, nobody took it anyway. So we've got one doctor who's employed by the NHS here, Shanann, but we have advanced nurse practitioners that support that service. Was that something that we looked at for that area, or was it not viable?
Absolutely. So I suppose it is worth mentioning that one of the options, so the practice is currently 2C, which means directly managed. So that means that we have taken over the employment of the staff. Unfortunately, we haven't got any employed GPs. They're all locums who are currently working in the practice, and actually trying to recruit GPs is difficult. We did have some of the ANPs from our care home ANP team went in to support and provide some cover short term, but obviously that wasn't a sustainable long-term option, because it's a separate issue, but we have difficulty recruiting to those posts anyway. ANPs are in a shortage, Scotland-wide, UK-wide, and the solution for many problems is being seen as ANPs, but they're a limited resource like everybody else, unfortunately. So it's worth mentioning that the 2C option long-term, for some health boards, they do have, if you went to Orkney or Shetland, they have a lot of practices that are run as 2C, but that's a standard approach to areas where there is an acceptance that the model of independent contractors isn't sustainable, isn't available. We have no infrastructure within NHS GGC to operate practices long term as a 2C. We'd have to create an entire infrastructure, and fundamentally the competition in NHS GGC, when you've got 250 practices, if we were trying to employ GPs to work in that one practice, would be incredibly difficult. And I don't have confidence that I'm going to do a better job than that GP's done over the last 5 years trying to keep that practice running. So I think we would have all the same sustainability problems trying to run it as a 2C practice long term, out with the context that that's not something that is that the health board is doing or is in the business of currently.
Thank you, Stuart. Margaret Kerr.
Thanks, Sean. I think Annie was before me. Sorry, I'm
No, Annie had her hand up earlier. Is this about this, Margaret? Is it about the practice?
Yes, I've got a question for Stuart, if that's okay. Stuart, thanks so much for that update. It's really helpful, and a bit of detail that I probably didn't appreciate that you had to go through is really helpful. My question, I suppose, is a bit longer term and maybe not really for you at this stage, but I guess across the board area, are there others that are at risk? And what can we do now to head off some of these risks? Because obviously we are resource constrained. I get that. It's not just a case of shoring in new people, but just if you're able to explain to what extent is this a one-off situation, or is this a problem that we're going to see more of, or just peppering over the next few years?
I think that's a really good question and a good point. And I know pre-pandemic there was a discussion around GP sustainability at Scottish Government, and there was a lot of focus on that. I think the answer probably is the new GP contract and the MDT that's being provided around general practice is thought to be the answer in a lot of ways, in the sense that having ANPs, pharmacotherapy colleagues, MSK physiotherapists, etc., would be the solution for a lot of practices, but you're still going to potentially have small numbers of practices that may still be at risk because of their size and because of the reliance. You know, you've got a key person problem that once that key person becomes unwell or retires or resigns or whatever, you will have an acute problem. I know that the primary care support have been working with other practices to look at, and I'm aware in Glasgow City they've had other practices step in and deliver services on a short-term basis so that the patients are covered by neighbouring practices short-term while a longer-term solution is found. I think fundamentally there probably is going to be a gradual move towards slightly larger practices and single-handed practices being more difficult long-term to be sustainable. And you never want to be broad brush, because some single-handed practices are amazing and deliver a fantastic personalised service that if it's sustainable is brilliant, and we would never want to discourage. But I think certainly there is work out there trying to look at ways of supporting. The pandemic's helped because GPs are working together in a way they would never have worked 2.5 years ago, in the sense that we've had a lot of practices throughout the pandemic that have said, I can't open today, or I've got no staff to see any patients, and then we've got kind of a buddying system where buddy practices, it's not contractual and it's not compulsory, but through kind of collaboration and good team working and good relationships, they will just step in and provide cover. So I think we have got short to medium term solutions, and I think longer term, I think it would be just running through this process again for the practices that ended up in this situation. But there's an awful lot of effort that goes in to avoiding this situation. And you know, I've worked in the practice as a locum when I first came to Renfrewshire, because there were problems 5 years ago. So this has been this is sort of it's kind of managed to limp through COVID, but I think we just couldn't make it last sustainably long term. But there is work going on locally, regionally, and nationally on that, because you're right.
Thank you, Stuart. Can we come back to you, Christine? Have you got more of your report to comment on?
No, I don't, John. So happy to take any questions on the wider report.
Okay, Margaret, are you putting your hand down? We come eventually to a very patient Annie.
No, thank you very much. And in fact, they're probably two linked questions. So I'll go to Stuart first. I wondered if Anne Cameron, sorry, of course my phone rings at that point, but I will switch it off. The situation in the with the staff, you explained they were TUPE'd over to NHS employment and they will be in redeployment register to move forward. Obviously they were previously non-NHS. Have they, I don't know if they're members of trade unions, or because they won't necessarily be linked in with NHS branches to ensure that they have got partnership support. Has that happened?
That is a really good question. I haven't got the answer to that, to be perfectly honest, off the top of my head. I think we've been focusing on trying to get them onto payroll and get through the bureaucracy associated with getting people into the health board who haven't previously. So it's as you know, with the GP practice, you speak to the practice manager and they sort your wages out and contact the bank and you've been paid. There's this whole complexity around moving people into health board employees. So I suppose it's been a kind of a Maslow's hierarchy of they need to get the pay sorted first, and then all the other bits we would do next. But I think I'll take that to Brian Green, because he's been ahead of people in HR, because he's been involved in those meetings with the staff alongside myself, and we'll pick that up next time we meet with them.
I think it's really
That's a good
helpful
point.
for staff when they're, sorry about this, of course.
Yeah.
I think it's really helpful for staff, especially if they're moving through a redeployment process. So thank you.
It's an anxious time.
Yeah. And Christine, you really delighted to hear about the Bishopton development. And I suppose my issue is a staffing one as well. Brian sort of highlighted the difficulty in recruitment of GPs, the recruitment of ANPs, and I don't know if Karen Jarvis has a mention on the development of the ANP post. However, our Bishopton has expanded exponentially, and there's a lot of young families, and I don't know if the health visitor and other services are being increased to meet that need as well, or is that yet another bid that maybe needs to go in? Because I know a lot of people have moved into the area from Glasgow and other areas that were not previously in Renfrew.
So that's some of our wider planning, Annie, in terms of the first thing was to actually get agreement and get this build started. But we are absolutely working really closely with the GPs, as Stuart is, and we're looking at the changing need and looking at the numbers and what the demographic is in terms of what that actually would mean. This will allow us to, so before we were a bit pushed in, even without the new houses, we were a bit pushed with space to be able to provide the wider HSCP type services within the existing building. So this will actually allow us to be able to bring some services in that we haven't been able to do before. So we are mapping that out about what our future need will be, and almost a kind of phased approach, but we are mindful of the thing that is never far from our minds about the recruitment challenges that we face across a number of our services. So we are looking at increasing capacity on a whole range of types of service for Bishopton.
Okay, thank you. Did I see Fiona's hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning. I was just wondering, with the new hub in Bishopton, what facilities have been put in place for the autistic community?
Within Bishopton?
Yes,
So anybody in Bishopton who can access, so as you know, we plan those types of services across Renfrewshire at the moment. So anybody within Bishopton can access the services that we've got, but we do feel that this will give us a bit of an added option for us in terms of a bit more space that we might be able to deliver things a bit more locally. So that would be the change. But as I said to Annie, Fiona, we are looking at what the needs will be of that new increased population, and potentially then look at coming up with some responses and some solutions about how we deliver based on the needs.
Super, thank you.
Is that okay, Fiona?
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to put your hand down, please? Are there any other hands up?
Yeah, you've got Councillor McLaren has got his hand up, and Councillor Adam McGregor.
James, you go ahead, please.
Thank you, John. So getting back to the St James's Medical Centre, if I can, I think option 3 is definitely the right option to go with. More of a general question for Stuart, I guess, though. What is the optimum number of patients for a GP? And I was wondering if it would be possible to see a list of practices in Renfrewshire with the number of GPs and I suppose locums and what part they play, along with the size of patient list for these GPs. That would be interesting information, I think.
Oh, sorry. Do you want me to,
Let's answer that question before I go on to Bishopton then.
Yeah, so I think the first question is, I don't think there is necessarily an optimum. I suppose it's if you're talking about number of patients per GP, so kind of there are kind of various different measures of what people view as a sort of optimum number of patients per GP, sort of 1,200, 1,500, you know, it can vary, and it depends what you would view as full time, because obviously, you know, 10 sessions of general practice is no longer realistic in terms of full time, because most people have a 13-hour day on a day. So actually most people work 8 sessions, which is 4 days spread through the week, because obviously that comes to a kind of 45+ hour week. So there's lots of different complexities about that. And then also in terms of list size, obviously the list sizes are available publicly in terms of every practice. We don't collect necessarily complete workforce data from practices, so we don't always know exactly how many GPs they've got and how many sessions they work. Certainly that is being collected by the health board, by primary care support, with a view to supporting around COVID absences and understanding where the capacity in the practices are. But certainly fundamentally in terms of staffing, that is something that each practice would have a little bit of control over themselves. But I suppose it's not necessarily there's a difference between the optimum staffing that they would aspire to have and what they can actually recruit to and actually manage to deliver. Because I think the bigger challenge at the moment is recruitment rather than aspiring to have a certain number of patients per GP. I think most GPs would rather have more colleagues in the practice and a reduction in workload, but it isn't necessarily feasible. I'll stop there.
So, John, I think it'd be quite good to get a report on that sometime, because it's information that I think the general public would like to know, as well as members of this IJB, I imagine.
James, can I just come in there and say, Stuart and Christine, is there a view on that? Or you want to think about it?
Can I take it to Lorna Kelly at Primary Care Support and get some advice, and then speak to Christine and come back to you? Is that okay?
Okay, yes, I'm conscious that it isn't just a matter of saying yes to things that involve personal data and so on. James, please carry on.
Thank you. Sorry, I should apologise. I'm not putting my camera on because I'm hot spotting on the phone or whatever it's called, just to get on. I can't
see how many bikes you've got on the wall.
No, you can't see how many bikes I've got. I don't have any bikes in this room at the moment anyway. So can I go on to Bishopton, please? It's good to see. Good to see a report about Bishopton in the papers. Thank you for that. The new build that's going to happen by 2024, summer of 2024, will that mean that there will be a second GP practice, or will you continue with the same GP practice as we have at the moment? That's my main question. And I think in the long term, probably you might find that we're needing an extension before 2035, the way the number of houses are going up. Thank you.
Happy to come back if that's all right. So no, it would be viewed as additional capacity for the current contract holder. We wouldn't be advertising, or wouldn't be planning to advertise a new GP contract for that building. It's being viewed as a satellite branch surgery for the current contract holders, which is the practice, the Bishopton Medical Practice currently. In terms of capacity, I think, as Christine has mentioned in the report, there will be the ability to expand that. So there's going to be vacant space, and the prospect of expanding it to be I think it's going to be built in a U shape with the ability to kind of extend the U into a full sort of square. So I think there's going to be capacity options in terms of expanding. The current health centre, it's important to remember, is being upgraded and having additional clinical space created as well, and that will happen. That's kind of happening imminently, so that work is due to happen if it's not started already. So there's the short-term increase in capacity, which will be delivered in the next sort of 6 to 12 months in the current site, and also upgrades to make sure that that's fit for purpose for the next sort of 30, 40 years, and it's not viewed as a temporary structure or a temporary building, as well as then having that additional space coming on stream with the ability for patients to attend either site as well. So it isn't a sort of case of people in this side of the village go there and people that side go there. They'll get offered to attend if they need to attend to either site. Presumably that's obviously will be some extent within the gift of the practice, but that was what we would anticipate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jennifer.
Thank you, John. Sure, I just wanted to come in with St James's Medical Centre. I knew it was going on because I've got family members that are in that practice, so I was watching it closely on social media. But what came through loud and clear to me, Stuart, was how the gratitude they had for the sole partner that lasted so long, and the respect they had for the locums. She seemed to be very, very popular. They really, really were. So, as I say, the handling of it, option 3, by far the best. And just to thank you for your handling of it, Stuart, because as I say, there was 47 comments there, and nothing came out, you know, too negative because of the handling of it. So I would say handled very well, all things considered, Stuart. So well done.
Stuart, can you take that compliment personally, and to your colleagues who've worked with you on that? I think I did nod in the passing to say it couldn't have been easy for the existing GP and those that had helped him, and I now understand a female locum and so on. And you do feel, I'm a bit of a teddy bear. I always see the other side of it, and that is the sense in which someone has come to this decision after a long number of years, and as you say, quite a struggle. And you yourself have indicated that you may not have been able to have handled it any better in the process. So, and I'm of an age when I go back to when my GP in Alexandra Parade in Glasgow was on his own, and so he was there night and day, and he sensibly married a doctor, and she came in between having her children to help him out. But those were the days. You think it's hard now. It certainly was hard then too. So, Stuart, thank you for your very fulsome answers and your comments. We appreciate that greatly. And Christine, Jacqueline's come in.
Sorry,
Jacqueline's been coming in tail end here. Are you trying to, as Vice Chair, are you trying to upset me this morning? No, on you go.
Just a wee last minute thought. It was just to acknowledge the interim arrangements for the Disability Resource Centre. I'd asked Karen about that previously. So it's good to see that there's some days available for people, but obviously it's not like for like in what they had before. So it was just to get a bit of assurance from Karen that we're still working on that for the future.
Yeah, I can come in, Councillor Cameron, and can reassure. So what we've got actually at the moment, and we've kind of upped that a wee bit, we are utilising 3 community-based resources. So we've got the Anchor Centre, we've got Beechwood Community Centre, and we have got Finding Your Feet. And Finding Your Feet, we've got service users going in there on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. At Beechwood Community, we've got service users going in a Wednesday and a Thursday, and at the Anchor, we're in there on a Friday. So we've actually now got more days available than we had within the DRC, which is actually really, really welcome. And it's also providing that community linkage for the folks who are utilising those community resources. We've also got a meeting next week to get a kind of result of the investigation both into the fire and the damage. So there's a meeting really to estimate how much is the cost for the repair, or indeed if that's feasible. I don't know, I actually haven't seen the breakdown of the report yet, but I'll be able to update further after we have the meeting next week.
Thanks, Karen, that's good to know.
Okay, and Karen, that's something you'll keep on your radar, will you? Because it's obviously a great community concern, and elected members too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I don't see any other hands. Sorry, Jennifer, yes.
To Karen, see, after the last meeting, Roar reached out to me and Renfrewshire Access Panel, and both offered the use of their facilities, you know, so that was Cassie for Roar, the CEOs that got in touch with me. So that's I also think, you know, it's a testament to the partnership working, the fact that they are reaching out and offering their premises days after our meeting. So just in case you aren't aware of that, Karen, along with other ones.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that, Councillor Adam McGregor. That's excellent. And I see Fiona's got her hand up.
Yeah, she's playing games with me this morning. Fiona, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We've just been asked by the Carer Centre to ask, have repairs started at the Disability Resource Centre? And is there any idea of when you're thinking about opening it up again?
Sorry, what was that, Fiona? I missed the first part.
Have repairs started at the Disability Resource Centre yet?
Well, that's what I was saying. There's a meeting next week to discuss it. So we had to do a full investigation into the damage, the cost of the damage, and also the fire investigation had to conclude before we start any of that work. So there's a meeting next week that will be able to bring all of that together and with a plan of how we move forward.
I'll feed that back. Thank you.
Jennifer, is your hand still up?
No, sorry, John, that's historical. I forgot to take it down.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I don't see any more hands up. And so I say, Christine, thank you for this report, again, fulsome, and meeting with considerable approval. And we do note that there are items like the last one there that we want to keep on the radar and come back with, and I know you'll do that. So we now move to Sarah Lavers. Sarah, are you in the room? I hope you are. For item 8 is your financial report, please.
Yes, John, I'm here. Can you see me?
I can now. Yeah, I can now, and I feel much encouraged as a result of it.
Oh dear, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you, John. So the report is in its usual format and is quite lengthy. So as usual, I'll not go into any detail, but happy to answer any questions of members and from members. So the position is, as previously reported, we have got a significant underspend. This was done at the end of November, and we're projecting 1.2 million at that point. It's likely that that projected underspend will increase towards the year end, and that will reflect the impact of Omicron on our ability to recruit to vacancies, and also the impact on our care home admissions. So that's all contributing to the underspend, and it is likely that that will continue. In addition to that, members need to be aware that the monies that we got from the Scottish Government in December for winter planning monies, it's likely that there will be significant underspends there as well due to the lateness of that, and again the ability to recruit to posts. However, the Scottish Government, similar to last year, will give us a letter of comfort and basically instructing us to carry those forwards in earmarked reserves and to draw them down next year. So that will be quite specific funding, and you'll see them sitting in the earmarked reserve similar to last year. And if there's a similar position to COVID monies, will be instructed to do the same there. I think a point to note for members is that the health budget offer for 21-22, we received that in early December, so that's included within the papers here, and it's in line with what we had anticipated. So it's just for noting that. So in the final part of the report, with reference to the adult social care pay uplift in section 11, we're making good progress with paying that. We've slightly deviated from the way that the Scottish Government wanted it done, but we've got approval from them and COSLA that what we're doing is correct. We are actually paying the money straight out to providers. We had initially sent letters asking them to respond to us to say that they were happy with the conditions. That was taking an awful long time, so we were really cognizant of the fact that we wanted the money out by the due date in February. So we took legal and procurement advice, and the narrative that we sent out to providers basically says that we are paying the monies, when the assumption is that we will pay it out to your staff in line with the guidance. But we will review that at a later date, because as you'll be aware, there's similar uplift from April, so we're really keen to get this uplift out to providers. So those are the main points at this part of the financial year, but happy to take any questions from anybody.
Thank you, Sarah. Jacqueline, your hand's up.
Thanks, Chair. No, it wasn't a question, it was just to say to Sarah that I'm supportive of the action that they've taken on the uplift for wages, because I know it was a tricky one where you had to get the wages in the bank accounts quickly, but you obviously had to work with providers. So I think that the way you've handled it is perfect, and hopefully it won't be too difficult going forward.
Thank you, that's appreciated.
Any other questions? You're getting off scot-free here, Sarah Lavers. I have a question. I have a question, and it isn't a leading question with a supplementary, depending on your answer, which are always the dreaded ones. There's £100 million held in reserves across the whole of the IJBs in Scotland, which is a huge amount of money. In the case of Renfrewshire, I take it that we are spending the money as quickly as we can, and I don't, that's a kind of rhetorical question, but I say it in order to say, and we're using as much discretion as we possibly can, and this is directed at Christine as well, in terms of where we've got wriggle room to spend money, get it out and get it working, as opposed to it sitting as it is doing across the whole of Scotland. And the Central Belt in particular are the ones with the big numbers, including ourselves.
Yes, John, we're doing everything we can to spend the money, and it's the majority of it obviously sits in earmarked reserves, and a lot of that funding is specific and ring-fenced. For example, you've got the alcohol and drug partnership monies, you've got the primary care improvement monies, which sits directly linked to the MOU that Stuart was talking about earlier to support GP practices. We've also got COVID money, so a lot of that is ring-fenced, and our ability to draw that down is absolutely based on when we can recruit to specific posts. There's also monies in there in relation to refurbishment works, etc. And some of that has been slowed due to COVID and the ability of supplies and also to get contractors on board. But we will continue to try and spend that money in line with the agreement with the IJB. But it's a really difficult position at the moment, because we do get a lot of the funding and it is ring fenced, and quite rightly so, for example, the GP monies and the ADPs. But the balance of stuff, we've got clear programmes within there, like the district nurse recruitment programme, the respiratory nursing stuff that the IJB agreed, and also the fixed term posts that we're trying to recruit to. Where we can't recruit to posts and we're having difficulty, we're reviewing the type of posts as well. So there's an ongoing dialogue with the SMT on how we can use those monies. I hope that provides some reassurance to you.
Stuart, are you still in the room?
I am indeed, yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to catch you out there. I've been accused of saying that people switch their camera on and lie drunk on the couch. I'm not suggesting that for a moment with my clinical director. Have we got a link? Have we got a that's Iron Brew, I hope. Have we got a link? Have we got link workers in Renfrewshire? What lies behind that is the sense in which link workers were certainly suggested as being a screen to people coming who had low mood or who had anxiety and various things, where social prescribing, or as I think it's called now, a community referral, could be much more useful. And I think we know that. We don't need convincing about the fact that, you know, that people can go to various things if they're directed and if they're properly established. And I'm just thinking that at some stage or another, public and population health should be pushing and saying, listen, let's get discretion to spend money where that would be helpful and would keep people away from the emergency departments and certainly away from primary care in the case of GPs. Have you got a view on that?
Just briefly, Chair, we have got community link workers in every practice in Renfrewshire and all 29 practices. We were, I think, the first of the HSCPs and GGC to push forward with the link worker model in every practice. We are using some of the PCIP underspend, which is non-recurring, to work with the provider of the link worker service, because that's a contracted service, to work with the provider of the link workers to the practices to see if we can, on a short-term basis, have additional supply and capacity in the link worker coverage to practices, because obviously I think the impact of the pandemic means that there is much more kind of psychosocial pressure on everybody at the moment. So yes, we are using the reserve where we can for fixed term, short term expansion of services, but obviously, as Sarah will rightly say, it can't be used for recurring posts or long term posts because it's only fixed amounts of funding. But yes.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Sarah, nothing to add to that?
No, I think Stuart covered all that.
Okay. Annie, your hands up.
Yeah, it was just really, I suppose it's linking everything. It's the shortage. It was that really keen to hear you talk about the amount of money sitting in reserves and some of the ring fence money. We've already said in Stuart's report, and indeed probably the Bishopton report, and I know from Karen Jarvis, about the shortages of advanced nurse practitioners. And if there's ring fence money for recruitment of such, is there any way of negotiating the training of such so that we begin to grow our own and develop using reserves? Because if we don't begin that journey, we'll be in the same position as in 3, 4, 5 years. And I wondered if there was any way, Sarah, we could dip into reserves to begin to pump prime what we're futurely needing.
Yeah, I can answer that actually, Annie. We do have money set aside within the earmark reserves for training specifically for that. But again, it's getting people, recruiting people that want to do the training. So we are absolutely open, the whole partnership and the SMT discuss this regularly, to actually growing your own and training. So that the money side of it is not an issue. It's getting people on board to actually want to do it. And that's our biggest focus, as you would be.
As member of this from staff partnership, but also as a senior nurse in practice development, I'd be very, very happy to work with you to see how we can attract and get people to grow, because these are really good posts for staff to grow into.
Absolutely.
Christine, you had your hand up and then brought it back down again.
I was just going to come in and answer Annie's question, but Sarah's answered it.
Okay. Just to say, not just to Annie, but to everyone in the room, we know that the recruitment of people is a huge inhibitor to many of the things ambitions that initiatives that we want to do in Renfrewshire and indeed across the whole of the National Health Service. And if we could just wave a wand and have people in all of these posts and so on, we would be much more advanced than we are in many of our ambitions. But I know that we're leaving no stone unturned. We're working across HSCPs, IJBs. We're working with the board itself, GGC, to share all the ideas that we'll have of how we might attract people to apply for these posts and see them from, and upskilling people that are in posts who have ambitions to do more. And we're using every opportunity to do that. And I think Sarah will report from time to time as the person in charge of administration of how well we're getting on with these things, where we are being successful so that we can claim success, and where we are struggling, so that we're quite clear as an IJB that we're doing our very best to provide these services through recruiting of skilled people. Okay, we move on to item 9 on the agenda, and it's Jackie. Sorry, Christine.
John, there was someone with their hand up, but I think they've just put it back down. Was it Councillor Hughes?
No, it was Karen Jarvis.
Karen Jarvis now, but it was Councillor Hughes a minute ago that had her hand up. If you maybe your question's been answered.
I was just going to come in on John's point about social prescribing, Christine, but what I'll maybe do is just send him a wee email with the detail, just on the basis of, obviously, I'm chair of OneRen, which is the major provider of culture and leisure, and I was going to talk about the work that we are already doing as part of the HSCP and the really good links that we have. But John, I'll send you more of the details so that you've got sort of a broad brush awareness of it.
Okay, that's helpful because Lisa Marie, because I wear another hat, which is the chair of the Standing Committee on Public and Population Health for the board, and also as vice chair of the board itself. So that would be very helpful. Thank you. Christine, was it Karen Jarvis? Karen, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just in relation to Annie's point about the promotion of community nursing, and just to say that we have been really active in that to try and recruit people from newly qualified practitioners and then creating career opportunities so that there's a pathway for nurses in community nursing. However, if Annie is willing to meet with me, she may have some ideas that we haven't actually explored, and obviously that would be a good idea to look at some joint working in relation to that. Anything that we can do to try and promote community nursing will be a benefit. So that was all.
Okay, that's great. Without prolonging the discussion, have we appointed any Queen's nurses yet?
Yes, I think we've got
many.
Yes, we've got the most in the whole of GG&C, John.
Wonderful.
We already have 5 from the beginning of the programme in 2016, and this is the first year we haven't actually nominated anybody, because I thought I'd give others a bit of a chance with that, although there are some nurses from GG&C, from addiction services and from mental health services, which is good. But yeah, we already have 5.
That's wonderful. I say that with an interest because my dear late wife was a Queen's nurse, and she wore her. I've got her badges. I'm showing them to my 7 grandchildren because she was so proud of her training in Edinburgh and Dumby Dykes, which was the worst housing scheme, and she was across there and eventually was. You don't need to know all of this, but she was the district nurse midwife in Bishop Briggs and delivered half of Bishop Briggs at the time. But that's lovely, and the idea that nursing can upskill and be promoted and gain more stretching and rewarding experiences as a result of that responsibility. It's great to see that. Thank you very much. And you pardon my indulgence there, I got quite carried away.
We do have to note and accept the final budget offer, if you don't mind, just in the recommendation.
Sorry, okay.
Sorry, John.
Can we agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. Trouble is I get enthusiastic about things that are concerning people. I think, is it okay now to go to item 9 to Jackie Dougal? Yes. Head of Health and Social Care Services. Are you there in the room, Jackie?
John, thanks, Chair. The paper outlines the monies that the Scottish Government are allocated to the NHS board and to devolve down to the Renfrewshire HSCP there's tranche 1 and tranche 2 for our CAM service. Tranche 1 is around the full implementation of the CAM spec, working with children up to transitioning up to 25, and also to clear the backlog. And we've discussed before, the waiting times for CAMs have been unacceptably too long particularly for children, which is quite a proportion of their life. So the paper details the allocation of the money for tranche 1, which Renfrewshire's allocation is 933,000, and the paper details, in working with our partnership colleagues, from across GGC, that we moved to a centralised whole system approach to increase the CAMHS workforce, and it's a similar approach, you may recall, a few years ago that was used for Action 15 monies for adult mental health. So we're asking the IJB to approve the spending priorities identified for phase 1 as outlined for Renfrewshire as part of the wider plan, which our allocation is 933,000. As we've discussed, and this is very welcome monies to expand our CAMHS service. We've discussed about recruitment and wriggle room and developing posts, and we're asking for the workforce modelling that we've detailed out on page 87, that we have the ability to go ahead and recruit to the post, but also we have some wriggle room when we're unable to recruit to certain posts, that we can wriggle them to an alternative post rather than bring it return here, because we're similar to what we've already described. We're experiencing significant recruitment challenges because there's a limited pool of people that can apply for these posts, and sometimes when we go to actually give them a job offer, we find out they've accepted a post elsewhere. So we're just asking for some wriggle room to be able to amend the workforce modelling in line with the financial framework that we've got, and to maximise our income, to our recruitment, sorry. And note that proposals for phase 2 will come in an updated paper once that has been confirmed. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Are there any questions for Jackie? Jacqueline.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, obviously it's really welcome. It's great to see this funding in place, and some of it's recurring, which is obviously helpful too. But given the task ahead, how much do you think that this is going to help? Jackie, is it a bit of a sticking plaster, or do you think it's going to make a real dent in waiting times and make a real difference? I'm sorry if that sounds a bit cynical, but because it's obviously very welcome.
One of our challenges is the ability to recruit, because certain posts like psychology trainees, they do a course for a year and they only are completion once a year. So there's like an annual, you have to wait till they finish their course to be able to recruit to them. What we're trying to be as creative as we can in recruiting, and I'm sure Annie's picked up, we have an advanced nurse practitioner there. So it's a new post, it's a developing post. So we're trying to think both short term and also sustainability, that if we're ability to recruit and develop an advanced nurse practitioner in CAMHS, which will be the first across GGC, is that we will release some of the demand on our consultant psychiatrists, which means in turn children will be seen earlier and not have the length of waits that they've got. So the team are very positive and optimistic that the additional staff will come in and release some of the immediate pressures, but we also need to make sure that that model is sustainable long term.
It's okay if I come back, John?
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jackie. I think that was my other point, was about recruitment, as we've mentioned before, is part of the problem too. Also, it was just to say that it's good to see some money going towards transitions in CAMHS services. I met with Laura Howitt very, very early on as a counsellor, and people, had a lot of concerns about transitions generally, particularly in learning disabilities, and whether that was a perception or justified or not. It's certainly something as elected members we hear a lot about, so it's good to see that funding there as well.
There's a updated board-wide transition policy between CAMHS and adult mental health services, which the ask is for 3 months before the 18th birthday we start transitioning. We don't think that's long enough, and we start preparing with our adult mental health colleagues 6 months before, that there's starting joint working and thinking about moving from a children's world into an adult world, which can be scary, but making sure there's joint working, there's handover, and there's because some children will require longer than 3 months. They'll require quite a period of transition between the two services, and that children feel supported moving from child services to adult services.
Is that okay, Jacqueline?
Yep, that's great. Thanks very much, Jackie.
Annie, and then Lisa Marie.
Jackie sort of highlighted it again. It's an area of, we have a bit of an internal washing machine regarding recruitment of staff between each of the areas in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and that's an ongoing worry. So I would again stress around the traineeships in psychology, career pathway and framework, and beginning to develop people and perhaps dipping into funds early to pay for the traineeships, because we clearly are not really training enough to meet the needs of children and young people. And Councillor Jacqueline Cameron, just to say again, listening to Jackie around the 18, it's worth noting that if a child has additional support for learning needs under the promise, they would be remain in children's services potentially up to 25, with a much longer transition CAM service for LD. But it's often, these are the areas that are very challenging to provide services in, and these young people have an awful lot of transitions at the same time from sort of education, health and their social care needs all at once, and we really need to spend a lot of attention on that group. And I know Jackie's worked with them in the past, but I just wondered where that was in the planning, because it's a huge gap. But our staff, nursing staff, I don't know how we're going to grow everything we need, because we need a lot. But I want to work on it to get there.
The initial transition priorities, particularly around eating disorders, because during the pandemic there's been quite a dramatic increase in young people presenting with eating disorders, and expansion of the centralised eating disorder team. So that's a primary focus due to the demand on a number of services around eating disorders.
Thank you. Lisa Marie.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'll be brief, because a lot of what I was going to say has been reflected just in the past couple of conversations, but really pleased to see a focus on transition. I'll be more blunt than Jacqueline was. I worked in social care before I was a councillor. Now we're talking 5 years ago, and a lot of work has been done, but transitions have also always been an issue. Now, I didn't work in Renfrewshire, but I think I can say transitions have always been an issue across the board. And I worked in learning disability, and we particularly often ended up with people where the service maybe wasn't quite right as they transitioned, and by the age of maybe 20 they'd lost some of their independence at some point, and to me that's really not a situation we should be getting into. So I'm really pleased to see that focus, and also the flexibility on timelines, because I agree with you completely, Jackie. 3 months is not enough for someone with any sort of mental health issues, and when you're looking at learning disability, you could be looking at up to 18 months for that sort of transition. So I'm really pleased to see that flexibility. It gives me a lot of confidence in the work we'll do.
Okay, thank you. Do I see any other hands up?
Hello.
Fiona.
Fiona, you're testing me again, coming in at the tail end there. On you come.
Certainly am. I would just like to echo what Lisa Marie said. Transitions up until recently haven't been particularly good, not just in Renfrewshire, nationwide. I would also think 3 months is completely unrealistic to get it right for every child leaving school. And if they don't get the transition right, then they get into acute mental health services, which in turn costs an absolute fortune. So I think if you get the transition right for the child leaving school, it would have a huge positive impact on their life.
Thank you, Fiona. That's a wise comment. Thank you. Christine?
Yeah, just on that comment about transitions, I think we have been making significant improvements and changes to how we do that within Renfrewshire. So we absolutely, for learning disability, begin that transition much earlier, because we know it's such an important time for young people, in particular for families. So we have been learning from that and looking at the transitions right across our services. So we actually started some of this work prior to this becoming board-wide work within Renfrewshire, and we had looked at we reviewed and looked at some of the learning that we had when young people did transition into adult mental health services, and we felt that we could do better. So we actually developed a couple of posts looking at how we support that. So this is actually building on something that we had already recognised, and we're already looking at doing something a bit different. So I do agree 3 months is absolutely not enough, and we're seeing the benefits that we begin to work together earlier to actually support young people into the adult world, if you like, because it is such a big transition. So we've got a lot of activity underway prior to these developments that Jackie has just taken you through.
Thank you. No other hands up now, I don't think. Can I direct your attention to the recommendations in item 2 on the agenda? Note the priorities and funding that's been made available by the Scottish Government. Note Renfrewshire's CAMS, the willingness to work across with GGC. Approve the phase 1 money coming from the Scottish Government, and also note that a further phase 2 funding will be the subject of another report. Is that acceptable to the IJB? Okay, thank you. I now call on Karen O'Byrne. Are you there, Karen, for item 10, winter planning?
Yes, good morning, John. Thank you for that. Again, like others, what I'll do is I'll just pick out the kind of key points from the report, and then happy to take any questions anyone has. So as most people will be aware, because there was an awful lot of media publicity around it, on the 5th of October, the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care announced an investment of more than £300 million in recurring funds, and that was as a direct response to the winter pressures and system pressures that that the whole of Scotland were experiencing, and that was very welcome across all of the HSCP. The support was predicated really on 4 key principles of maximising capacity, ensuring staff wellbeing, ensuring system flow, and improving outcomes for our service users. The investment was distributed between health and social care systems through a number of routes, and with the responsibility for delivery being routed through our IJBs, health boards and our local authorities. In addition to the 300 million, as folks will be aware, there was a further 15 million made available, and that was to recruit those 1,000 health support workers across Scotland. And again, there's been lots of media publicity around that. In terms of Renfrewshire's share of that, we had £800,000, and that equated to 34 posts. The recruitment campaign has been managed through GGC centrally and is currently underway, although as already been discussed a number of times this morning, recruitment to these posts and other posts remain quite a significant challenge. We've already gone out twice to these posts and have managed to recruit, I think it's 9.3 whole-time equivalents. So as you can see, there's quite a significant gap. So we're looking at other ways that we can recruit into these posts and more innovative ways that we can manage some of this recruitment. In terms of the £300 million, the Scottish Government diverted that into 4 different funding streams. The first funding stream is around multidisciplinary working across health and social care systems, and that's really around supporting discharge from hospitals and to ensure that people can be cared for as close as possible to their own home, and that's a key driver for us in terms of our strategic plan and our one of our key priorities. In terms of Renfrewshire's funding allocation in relation to the multidisciplinary working for 21-22, we have 0.662 of £1 million in relation to delivery of that, and that increases to 1.324 million for 22-23. The second funding stream really is around providing interim care. This is non-recurring funding, and the support for this really is enabling safe discharge of patients from hospital into interim placements while they wait either a permanent placement within a care home or they wait a package of care at home support. The funding available for that in 21-22 is 1.3 million, and that reduces to 0.662 million for 22-23. So the focus for that really is moving things as quickly as possible over the next 6 to 12 months, but we absolutely have to do that in conjunction with families, because it's a very big change and move for patients. So we need to make sure that we take families on board and carers on board with us. The third funding stream is around care at home capacity, and we've already spoke at length around some of the crisis in our social care recruitment, and in particular around care at home. So the Scottish Government, in recognition of this, has allocated funding of 2.05 million for 21-22, and again that increases to 4.1 million for 22-23, and that is a really welcome addition to support our care at home. The final funding stream is about supporting staff's health and wellbeing, and again we've spoken about that today. That is absolutely invaluable. We know we've got a workforce who are tired, who have committed relentlessly and tirelessly for the last 20 months. So in recognition of that, the government is putting funding in to ensure that we are supporting our staff's health and wellbeing. And that's not only just across HSCPs, that's reaching out to our external providers, our GP practices, all of that is encompassed within that funding arrangement. Our share of that funding is £135,000. In addition to those 4 funding streams, Scottish Governments also wrote to the Chief Officers on the 17th of November, and they outlined further funding of 2.78 million nationally for the additional recruitment of mental health officers. And for Renfrewshire, that share is £86,000. And again, that's been allocated for next year, and then we will look to see what further allocations are coming. And as we've already discussed, although it's exceptionally welcome, all of this monies, it's come at a pace. So we've quickly met collectively within the HSCP and also across GGC and come up with quite robust plans as how we would go on and spend this money, and that's highlighted in appendix, the appendix attached to the report. But again, some of the key challenges remain, and that's around recruitment and also retention of staff, and also about, as I said, the pace in which the funding has come out, but also around making sure that we value the workforce that we already have, and that we are looking at how can we support them in the best ways utilising this funding. So that's kind of a very quick whistle stop tour, because I'm very aware of the time of the paper. It's a really lengthy paper and a lot of detail, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I see Annie's hand is up. You're busy this morning, Annie.
Well, I know, I do keep myself busy, but it's really kind of quick, Karen, and it's probably stating the obvious, but we're all talking about money, which is good news, but yes, we're also talking about the huge challenges in recruitment of staff, and I don't want this money to go into ring-fence reserves as well. And I suppose, have we sort of itemised all this on the risk register, and could we get a paper about all the challenges in staffing, particularly perhaps together, because I think it would be really helpful to mark it. And at the very beginning, you talked about the centralised recruitment. Now, I've been involved in centralised recruitment in the past, and sometimes there's winners and sometimes there's losers. And Absolutely. You often find the further out HSCPs are the losers in the centralised recruitment. And I wondered if part of your planning was to do a Renfrewshire recruitment process.
Okay, absolutely, Annie. So I'll pick up the first point, which is around the risk register for the number of vacancies. We're absolutely looking at that across the whole of the HSCP, and we're putting a focus on how we recruit, not just to our winter monies, but we're looking at recruitment in its widest sense. So we've had discussions with our HR across both the the health side of our of the HSCP and the council side of the HSCP, and we've got plans in place around how we can fast track recruitment. We've also got plans in place for quite a significant comms plan around recruitment, but we're also developing a wider recruitment strategy that encompasses all of the vacant posts that we have. But in terms of that risk register, we are absolutely recognising that that's one of the significant risks for us in HSCP as we move forward, but happy to bring a report to the IJB that just kind of details some of the work that we're doing to try and mitigate this.
Is that okay, Christine? Bringing a report back? Yep, okay. Thank you, Karen. Jacqueline?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just on the issue of staff wellbeing. It's good to see some of the actions outlined in the report. But I was just thinking that maybe generally for a future, maybe a development session or even maybe for the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Board, we could have a bit more detail about what we're doing to support staff, because we spend a lot of time at the IJB thanking staff and you know, acknowledging what, you know, how hard everyone's working, and I'm sure that they are being supported, but I think it would be good just to see a wee bit more detail. As you know, I'm on the Public Health Scotland board, and the reason that came to mind is because we had a development session about everything that's been done for staff, and it was quite a deep dive into, you know, what's available. I mean, things like we're probably doing already, like the iMatter survey, things like that.
Yes.
Just a wee bit more detail for the IJB in the future would be good to see.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Cameron. We'll make sure we bring that to a future IJB.
Okay. I see another hand up. I'm looking. Who is the other hand?
It's John Boylan. John?
John, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your report, Karen. I think the main thing I'm taking out of that report is, you know, in terms of care at home and in investment, but the real issue with recruitment around care at home is the rate of pay. And if we've not seen anything in the last 20 months, we've seen how vital care at home are to both the health service and to the people that they give the service to. And it's not really reflected in their hourly rate. And that's the bottom line. And I don't think that's a surprise, or I don't think there's anyone here who'd disagree with that. And I think there's an opportunity here for management and trade unions to sit down and discuss A, improving the rate of pay, and B, building in a career structure into care at home. I mean, I should acknowledge as a trade unionist as well that a lot of work has been done by care at home management in the last 20 months to improve the facilities and improve the working conditions that care at home are in. And that you should acknowledge that, you know, that goes from transport to welfare facilities to the vaccination programme, the way that was handled. You know, there's a lot of positive work being done, and it's an opportunity to build on that positive work. But always come back to this, it's the rate of pay. You know, we can acknowledge, and I'm grateful that the board do acknowledge the work that's done in care at home, but the bottom line is, let's see it in their pocket. Let's see people getting rewarded for the work they do. And I'm not saying that's your fault, Karen. That's just there's certainly an opportunity here to look at this. I mean, investing in the current workforce will increase retention, and it will make the job more attractive. And that's because you're now competing with bars and restaurants and so on at the rate of pay we're currently paying. So certainly that's something that, as the trade unions in Renfrewshire, are very more than willing to sit down with management, continue the work we're doing, but to build on what we're doing, in particular with care at home. Thanks.
Christine, thank you, John. Christine, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's just in response to John. So absolutely, John, we recognise that for us to retain staff and also to attract new staff into Renfrewshire, we need to have a decent career pathway. We need to be competitively placed in terms of terms and conditions, structure, etc. So we have had some early discussions with Alan Russell, our new Chief Exec for Renfrewshire Council, and we have agreed that we will move forward with looking at some of that and how we can achieve a more resilient care at home service and fill some of these vacancies. We've also, I met last week with the new head of HR within the council as well, Marlene, to just set that scene as well about we do need to do something a bit different in care at home, because the vacancy issue was pre-existing, so there was a high level of vacancies prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic really just shone a light on the service in terms of it not being as resilient as it needs to be. So we do have a bit of work there, and I'm absolutely delighted that we've got the support of our trade unions on moving forward with that. So we are doing that, and I did meet with Karen and I met with all of the care at home managers on Wednesday of this week to just talk through some of our plans and where we think, what we think would make a difference, and also more importantly, to hear from managers who are frontline managers of where they think we might be able to improve retention and recruitment for care at home staff. So we get loads of good ideas and a lot of thinking, and we're planning to also go out with a fairly substantial recruitment package in terms of just how we go out and how we advertise. So there's a lot of stuff underway at the moment, and we will want to come back and update members of the IJB on our plans and how we feel that we can move forward with this, because it's probably our #1 priority at the moment in terms of just making that service more resilient, but importantly retain the staff that we've already got, because they actually are very experienced. And as John said, one of the best ways to recruit new staff is through word of mouth from the staff that we already have. So we are working hard on that, but the process has begun.
Okay, thank you, Christine. No other hands up, I don't think. Karen, thank you for the work that you do and your team as well. That goes without saying, but it's not said casually. It's said genuinely, and the contributions and discussions, you can see that people are very engaged with this, and obviously recruitment should be constantly on our agenda in terms of an IJB. Okay, the recommendations are that we note the funding being made available for winter support, and note the investment planned as it's outlined in Appendix 1. Is that acceptable to everyone? Okay. Thank you. We move on to item 11 on the agenda, and that's Laura Howitt. Laura, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair. Everybody, all right, can you see me? Yeah, fine, thanks. Okay, thank you. This paper just gives the board an update on the implementation of Action 15 funds. There have been previous reports submitted to IJB, so I won't go into the full background of it. The details are there in the background summary and in the background under 1 and points 3. In relation to that. So recruitment is a key post funded by Action 15 of the National Mental Health Strategy has been integral to providing increased flexibility, opportunity and capacity across the mental health system, both locally in Renfrewshire and across the NHS GGC board area, as tests of change and jointly funded initiatives. Christine referenced earlier, and it is within the summary of the report, obviously the circumstances over the last 2 years have meant that we've been really concentrating on managing a very cohesive response to some of the critical demands within the mental health system, and that has been managed as a board-wide whole system approach. So much of the concentration has been managing the demands through the pandemic. Work has continued to promote the actions of the NHS and GGC mental health strategy, and make sure that the programme board are managing the work aligned with the pandemic response and our need to continue with the transformational change. So it's testimony, I think, to it's been referred to many times during the discussion today, to the workforce and the commitment for people not only continuing with the day-to-day work of managing to support patient safety and care, staff wellbeing, but also forging ahead with developments related to the actions within the mental health strategy. So the background is noted in point 3 of the report, and just as a reminder, the National Mental Health Strategy set out a range of 40 actions as commitments across 4 broad themes, which were prevention and early intervention, access to treatment and joined up services, the physical wellbeing of people with mental health problems, and rights, information use and planning. In terms of Action 15, it's specifically related to one of those themes around improving access to treatment and development of accessible joined up services, and promotes the Scottish Government commitment that the mental health workforce will be increased by 800 additional mental health workers over a 5-year period from 2017 to 2022, and that was an investment of £35 million to ensure that the workforce gave access to dedicated mental health professionals to all accident and emergency services, GP practices, police custody, suites and to our prisons. So section 3.4 and 4 just details the financial framework that we were working to as part of that plan, and you'll see that it was arranged across the board area and Renfrewshire's NRAC share of that as a percentage. Just to note that the GGC board area, the target for additional mental health workers was 179, and Renfrewshire's share of that target was 27.2. To highlight to board members today, at a meeting with the Scottish Government in October 2021, it was confirmed that the Renfrewshire IJB had performed well, and we had met our target of our 27.2 additional staffing from our allocated funding. Really positive feedback. I'm really pleased to say, and particular interest in specific areas and posts that we recruited to, particularly related to our Circle Recovery Hub. And board will remember that we did a presentation to a development session recently, the peer support worker test of change model across GGC and our community safety nurses, and that's with reference to their work and community links related to gender-based violence. And that aligns with some of the discussion today about the links with GP practices and our community links, because those nurses are specifically involved in that type of work. So as a result of that, to advise the board, we were invited to make further application for additional funding from Action 15, but carried with a stipulation that the posts should be recruited to before the end of March 22. So we were successful in getting funding for an additional 12 posts, and that was confirmed in December 2021. Recruitment, I'm pleased to say, is progressing to these posts now with a total value of additional funding at £544,416. Whilst that funding hasn't actually been confirmed in writing, it is an understanding that it's the intention of the Scottish Government to confirm that funding for all Action 15 posts will be made permanent. We do await informal communication. And just to note at point 4 in the report, some of the Renfrewshire and Pan-GGC Action 15 developments note that there has been an extensive range of activity both locally and across the board area, and it has increased the workforce and capacity of our services as set out within the ambitions of the Action 15. As always, and continuing with some of our developments across our strategic planning groups, engagement with people with lived experience and living experience continues to be a priority, and it's further enhanced with the representation on the local planning and reference groups and our development of Circle Recovery Hub and the peer support model. Attached to Appendix 1 is a summary of the key posts, developments and some of the tests of change, some of which are still in progress and subject to evaluation ongoing. So our next steps in relation to Action 15 to conclude our evaluations of our tests of change across the board area and then locally within Renfrewshire, to continue to recruit to outstanding posts by March 22, and to agree longer term commitments locally and GGC board-wide area pending confirmation of funding arrangements from the Scottish Government. So I would probably just ask you to just have a quick look or refer to the appendix in relation to some of the discussion that's happened this morning, in particular the community safety nurses, which I referenced in relation to the work with the GP surgeries. Also, a couple of CAMHS outreach posts. So CAMHS we did speak about, and the relationship between adult services, and these are posts that we thought were critical to make more robust the links we have, and to support young people who are experiencing difficulties to manage that transition more safely and at a better pace for them. Another couple of posts that are key to that are the community wellbeing nurses, and we have, as part of the Action 15 additional funding, recruited to both additional wellbeing and safety nurses as part of that. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. See Jacqueline's hands up.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it was good to see the summary of posts at the end. I think sometimes as a board we get a strategic overview of things, but maybe we don't see some of the operational detail. And while obviously it's not our place to interfere in that, it's good to have an understanding of where the money's going exactly. Some of the posts, as you say, we've already discussed, particularly Circle, the Recovery Hub, but I was really interested to see the posts, Laura, and particularly the discharge coordinator. Oh, sorry, I think I'm going a wee bit there. I'm thinking back to my old advocacy days, and I know that discharge or an unsafe discharge was often a theme for service users and for their families. So it's good to see that, because it was often a sort of revolving door where they would maybe end up back in hospital, or in some cases there was some tragic circumstances. So that's really good to see that, and as I say, good to see the detail of the other posts.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Canavan. I think someone else has got a hand up. I can't quite see.
Yep, I'm looking to see. James, is it you?
It is me, yes.
Yes, please speak.
Okay, thank you, John. So the question is regarding the 12 new posts that you mentioned, and that recruitment is ongoing. When do you anticipate filling these 12 posts? I know you talk about March being a confirmation date for all the posts. Give me an update on that, please.
Yes, well, as you know, the discussion that's happened today in relation to recruitment and the challenges and pressures we have around that. So whilst the funding was really, really welcome, it came with a stipulation that we had to get the post recruited to, as you're saying, by March 22. So we didn't sit on our hands with that. We had papers ready to move, and recruitment is underway to that. As we speak, Councillor McLaren.
So you anticipate filling these posts quite easily then?
Well, we anticipate that there may be some challenges with that, as I referred to today. So one of the challenges, I think, for us is that we do think we'll recruit to these posts, but we think they'll probably come from internal staff, just in relation to opportunities that are going to be given to some of our own workforce. So that is going to create additional pressure. But we would hope to mitigate that by having longer lead-in dates for the posts. If we can recruit to the posts, then potentially a longer lead-in to the start date, so that we are minimising the pressure on our current staffing.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think it's encouraging, Laura, to hear that people can be upskilled, people can take up opportunities internally. That, of course, gives you a domino effect elsewhere where you've got to backfill that. But nonetheless, for the individuals involved and for their ability to learn new skills and so on, that's good news. I wish we could have that kind of succession planning for everything, everywhere, and that we didn't go poaching off each other, but that's an inevitability. Though we are sharing much more between the IJBs, the HSCPs, in terms of certainly the 6 across Greater Glasgow and Clyde. I don't see any further hands up. Sorry, is there another hand up, or? It's just extraneous noise. Okay, thanks very much, Laura. You can see that you're working hard to make these things happen, and it's so easy for us to, and I'm not diminishing our questioning, but so easy to say, when are you going to do this by, and so on, when will we see the results of it? And these are good questions, and they're important questions, but it's another thing for the person turning the handle and making it happen, and that's you. So thank you to you and your team. Thank you. The recommendations are to note the progress that we're making, and also to look forward to another report in May. Is that right?
Yes, I felt the board would want sight of the progress of the wider strategy, and perhaps by May we'll have further information on whatever confirmation of funding we have from the Scottish Government. So we'll be in a better position to give feedback on the evaluation of the posts that we've discussed and whether or not they're going to be part of our longer term plans.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for noting that. Is that okay, those recommendations? Okay, we move to item 12, which is Francis speaking to us about the climate change duties, and we have a report here in item 12. Francis, please.
Thanks, John. This paper is asking the IJB to retrospectively approve our annual compliance report on our climate change duties. The report can be found in Appendix 1, and I just want to apologise. I appreciate that in the printout version, Appendix 1 is near impossible to read, but it's quite hard for us to change that, as it's a standard template that we were given. All public bodies have to complete the same prescribed template, and you will note that there are a number of elements in the template that aren't applicable to IJBs because they relate to policies and missions for relating to employment of people. So that sits with the partner organisations in their return. However, I do believe that our response this year does highlight our increased awareness of the intrinsic links between the climate emergency and poverty. And members will note that we actually have a number of commitments relating to climate change in our new draft strategic plan. So happy to take any questions on that. Thanks.
Okay, any questions to James McLaren?
Thank you.
James.
Hello, Francis. The question is on recycling. Apart from the typical recycling that you'd see a domestic household making with bottles and cans, what other recycling do we do? I mean, we must be going through an awful lot of PPE, for instance, at the moment, but I don't suppose that can be recycled. Have you got anything to say about recycling and what improvements are being made there?
A lot of the recycling in terms of equipment and waste and things sits with the council and the NHS, and we work with them around that, around paper, for example, and things. There is actually a drive to look at PPE just now. That's been in the media over the last week or so. But on the whole, the recycling programme sits with our two partner organisations and that we link in. So there'll be a natural reduction in a lot of paper use and printing, obviously, as a result of the pandemic that happened in offices. But previous to that, we had recycling bins throughout all the buildings, and there was a lot of initiatives to prevent unnecessary printing, use of paper, the use of recycled paper as well, hand dryers instead of paper. So there is a real drive in both partner organisations, and I sit on one of the net zero groups, certainly within the council, to contribute to the work specifically around some of our offices. I can get you a more robust answer if you want around
the specifics of that, but I don't have it, unfortunately, to hand, James, about exactly everything we recycle.
James?
Well, I'm not looking for too much detail, but yeah, it'd be nice to know, particularly around PPE, if we can recycle that.
Okay, I'll get you a specific response on PPE. Thanks.
That's great, thank you.
Annie, I see your hand up.
I found myself on the Net Zero Group for Partnership Forum in GGC. So again, I'll sort of maybe share some things that are coming in from that. However, just a couple of observations at the immunisation strategy group. I heard about the hand gel reuse of the bottles with a company in Inverclyde. They're being collected from the immunisation clinics, and then hand gel, which we use across all areas in health and social care. And a company in Inverclyde are manufacturing the gel and then refilling the bottles. And I wondered if Renfrewshire would look at participating in that, or where perhaps already being it's close to our area, there would be little transport costs as well. And the other is an interesting one, but it's probably a Scottish Government escalation one. The huge volume of plastic in the LFT testing that we're doing daily is beginning to bother me hugely. And my daughter was recently over from the US, and she had her LFT kits with her, which were made by Abbott and were made of cardboard and wood, which I found extremely interesting because they were totally recyclable.
Okay. So there's a theme here around, I guess, PPE testing and some of the new considerations, but I guess with living with COVID in the longer term, but also fulfilling our climate change duties. So that's something, unless Jackie, who I know is involved in our COVID services, knows anything specifically, that's something I'll take away as an action and come back on, if that's okay.
Okay. Any questions? I don't see any hands up. Thank you for that, Francis. You're asking us to retrospectively approve the contents of the compliance with Climate Change Report 2021.
Yes, please.
Is that homologated, to use a legal term? Okay, thumbs up. Well, thank you very much. I have one more item to deal with, and that is a surprise to me, which is that this is going to be Ken Graham's last IJB because he's retiring. And I cannot believe it. If there's incredulity in my voice, Ken, can you say a word so that I get you on my screen and I can talk to your picture?
Yes, I'm here, Chair. I'm definitely retiring.
Well, listen, I don't believe it, and I think I don't know whether you're the clerk. Have I got powers to stop you from retiring?
I can sincerely advise you, Chair, that you do not have such powers.
Well, I'm disappointed about that, and so is the rest of the IJB and the HSCP. Ken, you've been, and I've only been a few months, as you know, as on the board. I was in East Renfrewshire for 4 years before that, but I'm on Renfrewshire now. So I really, I've got something in front of me. You've been 38 meetings of the IJB, including the Audit, Risk and Security Committee. You've been Renfrewshire Council Head of Corporate Governance, and also the IJB as Standards Officer and Clerk. And so, you know, I have to thank you for these things. But I also want to say that, you know, I found your help to me invaluable in terms of me chairing. People, I suppose, assume that it's easy to chair these meetings, and it probably is if you do it better than I do, because I've already run 25 minutes over the 2 hours. But Ken, I found you to be, you know, it's not just to do with competence. and we must have that in our clerk and in our head of corporate governance. But it's your disposition, your pleasantness, and so on, and your gentleness. These are things that count with people. They notice those things. Just as we notice self-importance, which is all around us these days, but to see people who have a degree of humility, which is a lovely quality, and you have that. I sense that you have that, and I want to commend you for it, and needless to say, to wish you a long and happy and an active. Good gracious, you're far too young not to have an active retirement. So best wishes from all of us, Ken, on your retirement.
Thank you for those kind words, John. I really appreciate them. I mean, I think coming to an end of a 38-year career is obviously a big step for anyone. It's actually been a real pleasure working for the Renfrewshire IJB. It's not often you get the opportunity to be in at the start of something. And I know we've all got our own views on the governance structure around about IJBs and how at times they're bamboozling, but I can honestly say that I've enjoyed the support of yourself and your predecessors as chair, and also the support of the previous chief officer and Christine and her predecessor as interim chief officer as well. So it's been a fairly easy task for me in what could otherwise, and in some circumstances, could be a very, very difficult job. So I thank you all for that, and I just would like to wish you all well for the future.
Thank you. Well, it's you've made it easy, look easy, Ken. You've been, as you say, right at the beginning, 2015, which is 7 years ago. I see clapping hands all round. So best wishes to you and to your wife and family. Can I just issue a warning? The Vice Chair, Councillor Cameron, has passed her driving test. I don't know what days she's going to be driving, just so that we can keep off the road. But I've no doubt notice will be given of that. I think it remains for me to say the date of the next meeting is the 25th of March 2022 at 10 AM. And we're saying remotely by Teams, but Christine, we might well test the opinion of the membership to see whether they would like to, depending on how the pandemic goes and so on, how they would like to meet physically or in some way or another. I don't know. I don't think we can do a blended one, so it'll be either or. But we'll issue an email to that effect, or Christine will anyway. So thank you for your attendance again, and I say goodbye for the moment. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheerio. Bye.